popping off at our community comic club for April the 2024 Heartstopper Volume 5. Please note there will be spoilers in themes, plot, and character arcs for the 5 volumes of Heartstopper for Solitaire by Alice Oseman and Season 3 of the Netflix TV series of Heartstopper in the reading of the triggers. So if you want to avoid spoilers for those, unfortunately, tonight's comic club may not be for you. Consider yourself warned, and if you're still here, may spoilers be on your head. Testing, testing. Okay, that's a much better sound wave. All right. Moving on. So, trigger warnings. There will be mention and discussion of the following: anorexia and eating disorders, body dysmorphia, depression, acts of self-harm, domestic abuse, brief reference to previous events of non-consensual kissing, bullying, and blackmail, frequent mention of consensual sexual content involving both humans and cucumbers of both a penetrative and non-penetrative nature. Alice Oseman is an award-winning author, illustrator, and screenwriter born in 1994 in Kent, England. They have written 4 young adult contemporary novels: Solitaire, Radio Silence, I Was Born for This, and Loveless. They're the creator of the LGBTQIA+ young adult romance webcomic Heartstopper, which is now published in physical form by Hatchet Children's Group, and they're also the writer, creator, and executive producer of the television adaptation of Heartstopper on Netflix. Alice's first novel, Solitaire, was published when they were 19. So yeah, their dynamic in Solitaire was where Oseman's desire to tell their story began. How did they get to the point that they're at in Solitaire? Where will they go from there? Oseman spent countless hours lost and in love with the story of Nick and Charlie, bringing Oseman peace in a way writing their novels couldn't match. Originally a webcomic on Tumblr and Tapas, Heartstopper has amassed an enormous online fan base with over 52.1 million views to date. That's probably higher now. Alongside writing and drawing, Oseman enjoys playing piano semi-proficiently, Pokemon games, and purchasing too many Converse shoes. All right. Also, if you look to the slide up to your left, if you look to the slide that's on the screen in front of you, there is a timeline of where roughly each of the volumes fall. And yeah, that is at the end of Heartstopper Volume 5, the physical copy for anyone that's wanting to use that for their own personal purposes. But I will also upload a copy of this slide later on for anyone that desires it. All right. Yeah, so that basically means that all of the events of Solitaire should have happened before Volume 5 commences, if I'm reading that timeline correctly. All right. As you can see, we've got a sprawling cast of characters. We'll start with the 2 main characters. We have Charlie Spring, whose eating disorder got pretty bad during Volumes 3 and 4 of Heartstopper and the Solitaire novel, and he's had a couple of self-harm relapses too, spending a few weeks in a psychiatric ward, which, while terrifying for him, ended up really helping. He's in therapy now, and he's working on getting better, and is now by and large in a better place emotionally, with coping mechanisms to manage these disorders. He enjoys playing the drums. Charlie still has a tendency to be highly strung and tends to overthink things. He is an openly gay character. Nick Nelson is now openly bisexual to his family, friends, dogs, and school, and in a relationship with Charlie. They have exchanged I love yous. Nick has 2 dogs, as pictured, Nellie and Henry. Henry being the younger of the 2. One of Charlie's siblings has described Nick as the human embodiment of a golden retriever puppy, as well as being Truham's rugby captain and genuinely lovely person. Charlie has 2 siblings, younger brother Oliver, who didn't make the cut for the TV show, and older sister Tori, who was the original protagonist in Oseman's first ever published novel Solitaire. Alice Oseman has stated that Solitaire is her response to Catch It in the Rye, a narrative on youth culture about depression, sex, rebellion, identity, and the like. In that book, Tori feels like a passive, almost apathetic character, viewing life from the outside, but with big feelings on the inside. We get the sense as a reader that Tori is probably suffering from depression, but is never something that is diagnosed or treated. During the last quarter of the novel, Tori starts to question why everyone is so fake, and why nobody does anything in response to a character called Solitaire, who's been pulling elaborate pranks at her school that have led to people potentially getting hurt. Meeting newcomer to the school during Solitaire, the events of Solitaire, was a character of Michael Holden. Tori is drawn to him and they become friends, but it takes her a while to understand the attraction. She really is questioning if she is playing a role as a friend or if she has real feelings, not only with Michael, but the rest of her friend group. During Solitaire as well, we also saw Charlie struggle with his eating disorder a lot more than what you do in the Heartstopper graphic novels, and Tori pulls rank with the family to help him. The only time Tori seems to break out of her malaise is around family and eventually Michael. Tori witnesses some of Charlie's worst self-harm incidents, including reading a suicide note that he leaves for her, and likely has some untreated PTSD, and similar to Nick, has felt responsible at times for Charlie's conditions. Charlie, and by extension Nick's friends, include Tao Zhu and Ellie Argent, who are dating, as well as Arled Last, the only member of the Paris squad to be written out of the Netflix adaptation of Heartstopper. Arled's role was replaced with a new character, Isaac, an aromantic asexual character who has not yet appeared in the graphic novel universe. The reason for Arled's removal from the Netflix series was that Alice felt they couldn't give Arled a satisfying story arc in the series without derailing the elements of Radio Silence, another book that Oseman wrote, and instead hoped to save Arled's story for a possible Radio Silence adaptation in the future instead. Arled is a demisexual character. Nick's non-football friends are Tara Jones, who is straight-laced, quiet and observant, and Darcy Olsen, an extroverted, impulsive personality, and Tara and Darcy are both dating each other. There's also Sahar Zahid, a bisexual who loves escaping into fictional worlds and dreams of leaving the small town of Truam to pursue an adventure. Her favorite thing to do at school is band practice. Out of the main 8 members of the Paris squad, Sahar is the least explored member. She's overall kind, calm, incredibly smart, detail-oriented, and reasonable. So that's the end of my character descriptions. Was there anyone else that people felt was particularly important to cover? Or any other character traits that you feel that I've missed in relation to any of the characters important going into Volume 5? Oh, okay. Look, I gave Nelly an extra highlight. They appear twice on the characters page. They are both delights, and we like to think that Nelly was Nick's wingman and getting Charlie to visit Nick outside of school for the first time. We're going to start with April, the month. Charlie's 16th birthday arrives, and Charlie and Nick have an intense makeout session that ends awkwardly by virtue of feeling overwhelmed. Discussing the kiss with Tao and Arled afterwards, Tao and Arled suggest Charlie take things physically to the next step. Sex with Nick! Charlie had apparently said he discussed this with Nick last summer, who said he wasn't ready yet. But for context, England's summer months run from June through August, so assuming Charlie asked on the final day of August, it had been a minimum of 8 months since Charlie had last asked Nick about whether he was ready for sex. After his friends leave, Charlie tries to change his shirt, but experiences body dysmorphia and can't bring himself to wear any short-sleeve shirts. His friends congregate to throw him a 16th birthday party. Tori brings Michael, who she won't confirm whether they're dating or not. We see Charlie's new practices towards food in effect, not with an easy fix solution, but a constant process being applied and reinforced each day. Later into the party, the topic of uni options comes up in conversation, with Ellie adamant to apply to all the big London art colleges. Sahar wants to do history at a old uni, and Tara is tempted to go to a dance college, but the job prospects aren't great. When asked about his plans, Nick has always assumed he'd go to uni, but has no idea what his passions are or what he'd want to study. He arbitrarily says Kent because it's the closest to Charlie, and he evades questions about whether he thinks Charlie and Nick could deal with being long distance. As they fall asleep at the end of the night, after Charlie tells Nick in relation to uni to do what Nick wants, Nick tells Charlie not to worry about the uni thing, he only wants to be near Charlie. While they cuddle and drift asleep, Charlie refuses to remove his jumper, despite others feeling warm. Into May. Things heat up, with Charlie wanting to kiss Nick all the time. An annual sex ed class begins for Charlie, Tao, and Arled,
with the unleashing of the cucumbers for application of contraceptive practice. Uh, I had to get through that sentence with a straight face somehow, or at least a bisexual face. But anyway, okay. Meanwhile, Nick is drowning, thinking about his future, looking at university application websites, trying to work out how to choose the right university, and taking career discussion lessons. Kids around Nick are boasting about trading in their V cards, and peers discussing about whether losing one's V card is important or not, ranging in opinions from wanting to wait for somebody special, to losing it not being a big deal, to it being a big deal due to societal pressure. Nick weighs in that people should just do things at their own pace, his thoughts wandering to intimate moments with Charlie. After Charlie starts panic chatting about how nervous the prospect of sexual activity with Nick makes him because it would be an embarrassing or awkward experience, Tao confides to Charlie that he and Ellie have done some stuff, and while he was scared about getting it wrong, he knows if it's awkward, the two of them can laugh about it because it's supposed to be fun. Nick's friends notice Charlie and Nick have been more flirty than normal, including the footy boys. At Charlie's house, Nick and Charlie have a heated makeout session until Charlie's confronted by a black void of negativity, where Nick asks Charlie if it's okay to remove Charlie's shirt. Charlie admits he's nervous about removing his shirt due to internal thoughts. Charlie advises Nick that there's nothing he can do to help, but Charlie reassures Nick that he didn't want to stop. This is heightened by Charlie having dreams manifesting Charlie's fears that Nick finds Charlie's body disgusting. In Charlie's therapy session, he discloses he enters this headspace where he feels disgusting because he perceives himself as skinny and has scars, which is different to his normal headspace where he knows it's just his brain making things up, and he knows that Nick doesn't think like that either. Charlie knows they love each other and doesn't know why he has so much anxiety about it. The therapist explains Charlie feels anxious when in situations where Charlie feels like he doesn't have control due to having been in situations in the past where control has been taken away from him, like his being outed before he was ready to come out, and his toxic relationship with Ben, the person that he occasionally kissed prior to having met Nick. Even though they happened a while ago in the past, they're still traumatic experiences that could be affecting his current headspace. The therapist explains that a part of intimacy is trusting someone enough to let go of that control a little bit, which can be difficult, but it's important to remember that as long as Charlie and Nick trust and respect each other and are listening and communicating with each other, then Charlie is safe and there's nothing to worry about. Charlie mentions he wishes he was more confident, the therapist pointing out that Charlie does have confidence, having confessed his feelings to Nick first, when Charlie wasn't even sure whether Nick liked Charlie back. Charlie clarifies he doesn't feel confident, which the therapist poses is the challenge Charlie will have to face, finding that confidence again, not just with Nick, but every part of Charlie's life. Outside of his therapy session, Charlie gets an offer from Sahar Zahid to be the replacement drummer in their band at the Summer Fete, though Charlie is hesitant, being nervous about being on stage, normally playing by themselves. Um, but yeah, they have a bunch of yeah. I personally liked a lot of the little texts that were going through Charlie and Nick's phone conversation. It all felt very authentic. Um, the little bantery, flirty stuff that they were sort of doing. Yeah. And I found it the panel where the footy boys were noticing that they were being more flirty than normal. Very funny as well. Yeah. All right, moving into June. There's that head student application. Charlie's final day of year 11 has arrived for Charlie, who is headed on study leave. The reality that Charlie and Nick in 1 year and 4 months are going to be at separate schools, with Nick departing for university, is setting in. Nick is going to visit some unis in a few weeks with Tara and Ellie. Kent is Nick's first choice, but reckons he should see some other options, which Charlie agrees makes sense. Nick doesn't know which he wants to do with his life, and feels like he has to make a decision right now. Mr. Farouk wants Charlie to apply for the student leadership position of head boy for year 12, which would require a speech and interview process. Mr. Age, the art teacher, and Mr. Youssef Farouk are still dating. Nick asks Charlie to come round for a sleepover sometime. Nick's mum is on board, but has a conversation about using protection, which Nick is embarrassed by. Nick's mum apologizes for intruding and says that she's sure Nick has plenty of friends he can discuss this with, which makes Nick very quiet. Charlie asks his mum about the sleepover. Charlie asking his mum about the sleepover does not go remotely as smoothly. After not finding a break in his mum's busyness or grumpiness, he suggests one of the recommendations from his therapy in regards to his food behaviors, cooking a recipe. Uh, because it's a new recipe, he suggests his mum help him, which goes well. Brightening his mother's mood, post-meal, Charlie asks about the potential sleepover, which his mum says yes sometime in the distant future, giving an array of excuses from GCSE exams to the bigness of the step and his having been ill. Charlie interprets his mum's words and the spaces between them to mean that his mum sees him as a mentally unwell baby, unable to do anything fun or look after himself. After his mum tries to push the topic to some distant future time, Charlie blows up and storms out of the house, slamming the front door. The reader finds out Charlie's mum's hesitancy at the sleepover has less to do with Charlie's demons and more to do with her own, growing up in a physical, domestically abusive household. Charlie goes to Nick's for comfort, while Nick's mum is away for several hours, and Charlie relays the argument that happened with Charlie's mum. Charlie talks about Charlie's mum always thinking she's right and never listening to Charlie, being so tired of everyone treating him like he's fragile, that there's still hard days with his anorexia, but he's working hard on managing it. Charlie asks Nick if Nick thinks Charlie is fragile. Nick tells Charlie he's the strongest person Nick knows. Charlie knows who he is and what he wants, whereas Nick thinks he's more fragile than Charlie, because while Charlie gives Nick confidence, when Charlie's not around, Nick feels lost. Nick struggles to talk to anyone else like Nick talks to Charlie. Nick says, "When I realized I was bi, I felt like I woke up. Not just my sexuality, but my thoughts and feelings and personality. Because I was repressing so much of myself before then. But I think I still hide behind that mask a lot of the time. Just laughing and joking with mates, but never really opening up to anyone. Now that I've been thinking about my future, I've realized there's so much about myself I need to figure out." Charlie reassures Nick that it's okay to not have everything figured out right now, but that their mutual friends all care about Nick and they'd listen if Nick ever needed to talk about anything. And Nick has Charlie. Nick is concerned that Charlie came over upset and Nick's made it all about himself, but Charlie reassures him he's being silly. Physical activity escalates from kissing to more. Nick and Charlie engage in sexual intercourse. Charlie keeps his shirt on, and Nick doesn't mind. They both come out of it with a positive first experience, but resound they're going to have to practice. A lot. They make the important point of noting that sex can be all kinds of things, and what that entails is dependent on the consenting people engaging in the sexual acts together, communicating and reaching a consensus. During the sexual afterglow and cuddling stage, they talk a little more about Nick's uni prospects. Nick and Charlie exchange "I love yous," and Charlie heads home. Yeah, no, I think Alice very much, with their writing style, well, at least in the Heartstopper books, has a tendency to pick the moments that de-escalate potential for conflict as opposed to drive them up, and then use that de-escalation as a way to drive the story forward instead, which is definitely an interesting one. Yeah, it's maybe not as quite as dramatically fulfilling for a reader, but it's yeah, it allows for different explorations, which is really cool. Yeah, and reflective of reality when it is clumsy. Like there is like this is a very fairy flossy sort of world a lot of the time, even though it's got some dark issues to it. But at the same time, it's especially in these later volumes, they've been still finding a way, even though there's fairy floss, to make it feel very authentically real in terms of like the way that the characters talk and what their emotional states sort of are. If that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, and I also really liked the quote that Nick mentioned about, um, you know, his bi-ness and when he woke up, essentially, in terms of still hiding behind the mask at times, repressing, occasionally still, that causes him to still repress parts of himself. And there was a lot of relatability to that uh, in certain ways. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Charlie and Tori have a conversation where Charlie assumes Tori and Michael are dating. Tori clarifies that he doesn't know what he's talking about. Charlie and Charlie's mum chat, Charlie's mum admitting part of why she's so overbearing is because of how she was raised by her mother. She hears Charlie's comments about needing to live his life like any other teenager, even though he's been ill. She mentions that it's a big emotional step, having a sleepover with Charlie's boyfriend, and compromises that Charlie can have his sleepover, but it's important to wait till exams are over so as not to get distracted. During the exam period, Charlie and Nick get more practice with their intimate activities. Both prepare for and take exams. Charlie agrees to join the band. Tara contemplates applying to attend Oxford. Nick, Tara, and Ellie commence their college tour road trip with a kiss-filled goodbye from Nick to Charlie, Nick vowing to return in time for Charlie's performance at the school fete in 5 days' time. All right. At the first stop of the college tour road trip, the University of Kent, only 15 minutes away from their hometown, Nick is uncertain about his future and is mostly interested in Kent, not for the experience at the uni, but for external reasons in relation to his mum and mostly Charlie. Tara and Elle point out that Charlie could go to a different uni that's far away when he finishes school the following year, so they'd still potentially be separated. The date ends with the trio driving to the Oxford Uni dorms and Charlie and Nick falling asleep, FaceTiming one another. During the tour of the University of Oxford, Tara is unsure if she wants to apply to Oxford. Her girlfriend Darcy plans to take a gap year. Nick inquires on their thoughts about long-distance relationships, obviously wanting perspectives to apply to his and Charlie's potential situation next year. Darcy and Tara aren't particularly fazed by the prospect. Nick doesn't know what he'd do if he took a gap year and wants the uni experience, meeting new people, uni sports, societies, etc. Nick discloses to Ellie and Tara about his and Charlie's sexual activities. They discuss what that's entailed and get contraceptives in preparation for the future possibility of penetrative sexual activity. They visit Loughborough University that Elle really vibes with and jokingly says that Tao and her might be joining the long-distance club. Elle isn't going to sacrifice her future for a relationship and that long-distance couples can work, that they'll probably be fine. At the University of Leeds, Nick engages more with the tour guides. While undecided on what he wants to do, he thinks he might want to study in the realm of sports science or psychology and would like to carry on playing rugby in uni. The tour guide talks up the social aspect of the school. Seeing that there are openly queer people on the rugby team, Nick suddenly sees a space where he could fit in and belong outside of his high school bubble with Charlie, where he could be happy and surrounded by people who accept him. At the end of the day, Nick FaceTimes Charlie, who answers while shirtless, flustering Nick, but also implying that Charlie's body confidence has gradually been improving. They exchange I love yous, and Nick notes to himself that Leeds is 4.5 hours away via car from his hometown. On the drive back the next day, Tara notes that Nick doesn't open up to people very often, to anybody that isn't his boyfriend. Nick voices his fear that if he moves away, he'll hurt Charlie. Elle notes that Nick is a people pleaser, putting everybody else's feelings above Nick's own. He loves Charlie, but has to put his future first right now. Charlie will support Nick, and putting Nick first for once wouldn't make Charlie hate Nick. Nick admits that he's scared to be away from Charlie, because Nick doesn't know who he is without Charlie. Tara responds that maybe it's time for Nick to find out, and to just be honest with Charlie about what his preferred university preference would be. Meanwhile, Charlie, having filled out his head boy application form, picks a short-sleeved shirt that shows a little of his waist over his usual long-sleeved knitwear to wear and goes to the carnival. Carnival time! At the carnival, Charlie spends time with his friends, and Michael appears and advises that Tori is avoiding him, as he's posed the question about Michael and Tori being boyfriend and girlfriend. Michael has a bit of a panicked monologue over Charlie's surprise, thinking they already were boyfriend and girlfriend. Charlie explores the carnival alone, locating Tori, who tells Charlie that she is asexual, and implies that Michael is polysexual, I think. Tori doesn't want to be Michael's girlfriend because Tori believes they want different things, and doesn't want Michael to resent her even though she loves him and wants to be with him. She hasn't said this to him because she believes that Michael will say he's fine with it now, but he'll eventually come to resent her. Charlie tells Tori that her relationship can be whatever she wants. Girlfriend and boyfriend or not, who cares? Charlie said to Nick once that if he didn't ever want to have sex, then Charlie would be fine. Like, yes, Charlie really wants to do that with him, but if he didn't, Charlie wouldn't break up with him. Charlie would love Nick. Charlie knows not everyone feels that way about their relationships, and that's fine, but Charlie does. Maybe Michael does too. Tori says a lot of people would find Charlie weird for saying that, to which Charlie replies he doesn't care. Tori and Charlie hug. Then Tori goes to chat with Michael. We see the convo from a distance from Charlie's perspective, with the two of them close, talking, and happy. Yeah, yeah. No. And I also really liked some of what Tori said. Like some of the things that Tori says are very relatable in terms of the uh, worrying that a person says that they'll be fine now, and then come to resent them a bit, later down the line, and then say that they accept something about a person, yeah, but then come to hate that part about them or resent that part. Like that is a very reasonable, well-founded sort of relatable sort of fear. Yeah, yeah, not necessarily. Yeah, doesn't mean that the Charlie was very much right for her. Not necessarily listening to that and actually talking to the person in order to find out what they actually thought and take them on their words meaning, basically, as opposed to what an eventuality might be. But yeah, anyway, all right. Queer Intentions, the band, goes on stage to perform with Nick, stuck in traffic, returning from Leeds. Nick arrives and sees Charlie in his element performing on stage. After the performance, Nick apologizes for being late, and Charlie tells Nick that he was okay after a pep talk from Arlette and Tao. Charlie tells his mum he's going to sleep over at Nick's that night. Charlie feels okay to eat food at the carnival. Charlie notices Michael and Tori in the distance holding hands, perfectly undefined, but perfectly them. Nick, Charlie, and friends hang out for a bit while Charlie's family goes home. Charlie and Nick go to Nick's house, where Nick's mum and the dogs are away. Nick and Charlie remove each other's shirts, Charlie's self-confidence having reached a point where he's comfortable being seen by somebody else without a shirt. Charlie and Nick engage in penetrative sexual activity. In the aftermath, Charlie tells Nick about the head boy application. Nick thinks Charlie, having gone through some of the worst forms of bullying possible at their school, thinks Charlie will have some great ideas to keep that from happening to anybody else. Nick tells Charlie that Leeds University will be his top choice, gushing about what it'd be like to attend there. Charlie is on board, seeing the enthusiasm with which Nick talks. Charlie wants Nick to be somewhere he'll be happy, even with the bittersweet knowledge the location of that happiness is 4.5 hours away from Charlie. So that is where the Volume 5 ends. Uh, let's have some general discussion now about the entirety of Volume 5, and also the knowledge that Heartstopper will conclude with a sixth and final volume at some point. How did we feel about the book overall? How did we feel about the last part of that book, which we hadn't had a chance to discuss? I, yeah, I was almost expecting a fade to black sort of situation where it's like lots of like leaves going across the page, and then that's sort of just how that volume ends. I wasn't actually expecting the afterglow talk essentially that occurred afterwards either. Yeah, so I was just fully assuming that the climax would be the ending. Anyway,